Steeler Nation podcast, part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports podcast network, sponsored by Total Sports Enterprises. I'm your host, Stryker, and today I want to talk about the first great Pittsburgh Steeler head coach, Chuck Noll. And I've got to ask myself, anytime we're discussing great head coaches in the league or announcers start rattling off names for great head coaches, why is Chuck Noll never mentioned as one of the all-time great NFL head coaches? I mean, he was the first really great Super Bowl winner, aside from Lombardi winning the first two. Chuck Noll was the first to win 3. Then he was the first to win 4. And then it took a while before anybody beat that. I mean, we're talking about the Bill Belichick era before somebody beat his 4 Super Bowl wins. Obviously, Bill Belichick can be named 9, 10 Super Bowls, 6 wins. Yeah, it's tough to argue with that. Lombardi being a great coach, even up through, very iconic, very quotable, just sticks in the mind of people. But people always mention people like Don Shula, a guy that's only won, 2 Super Bowls? Sure, he had an undefeated season, but, I mean, he pooped the bed with Baltimore against Joe Namath. Didn't make it with one of the all-time greatest quarterbacks in Dan Marino, the best statistical quarterback at the time to play in the NFL. Only got to 1 Super Bowl with that kid in his rookie season. Couldn't do anything after that. Landry, iconic with the hat, but heck, he was Cowboys coach, I guess, right? Of course, we got to deal with Jimmy Johnson. People mention, Andy Reid and Bill Walsh. I mean, Bill Walsh arguably did develop a new style of play. The West Coast offense was exciting to watch. But when people are mentioning guys like Joe Gibbs or Paul Brown or John Madden or even Bill Parcells, I mean, these are guys with limited Super Bowl experience. Paul Brown had 0, obviously. I mean, he's playing in a league with like 8 to 10 to 16 max teams in it. Not like 30 like these other guys are playing in. So it's like a guy like John Madden. I mean, he was lucky to win a Super Bowl. He always thought his teams were better than what they were. He always had Chuck Noll punching his teams in the mouth, was saying that they were the best teams to play in the AFC when they were playing Miami Dolphins before they played the Steelers for the Immaculate Reception. Then Noll owns Madden his entire career, except for 1976, when both starting running backs gets hurt the game before and they have to play the Raiders with the best defense in league history. Fall to the Raiders. Raiders win their only Super Bowl in the 76 season. And John Madden's considered an all-time great coach. For that, that's crap. Absolute crap. I mean, there's a lot of nice nostalgia for a guy that did an excellent job as a broadcaster, explaining the game of football to the layman and making it very accessible for everybody, not just football fans, to become fans of the game and understand the game. And I respect him for that. But I don't think he's an all-time great head coach. I barely think he's a Hall of Fame head coach. I mean, obviously he made the Hall of Fame. 1 Super Bowl win, and you're in the Hall of Fame for being in the league as much as he was with all the great teams that he had that fell short to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And their 4 Super Bowl wins, with the Steelers nearly going through them every time, and in 1972, knocking them off in the Immaculate Reception. 50-year anniversary coming up here in December. That's just something that sticks in my craw. Bigger personality, no doubt. Same thing with Parcells. I mean, you're talking about big personalities. Landry, Parcells, Lombardi, Madden, hell yes. Even Vermeil. Big personalities on these guys. Noll didn't have a big personality. Noll was very stoic to the media. Rubbed the media the wrong way, in fact, with how stoic he was. Kind of like the way Bill Belichick is now. Doesn't say anything really at the media. He felt like it was something that was beneath him, and the media felt like they should be catered to. It was a waste of his time. His job is to coach a football team, not talk to the media. And that's the way he treated it. He was also a firm believer in life outside of football. Probably the only coach I've mentioned out of all of these coaches that didn't live, breathe, and eat football 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 66 on leap years, because he was a firm believer of life outside of football, family life, reading, passions, art, music. He was an all-around Renaissance man that happened to be an incredible football coach. Also made the great quote, once it's time to retire, he always says, it's time to get on with your life's work. Tells football players that their lives begin after football. Not to be defined as a football player, but when you get on with your life's work after football. And that is something that Chuck Noll did. As soon as he retired, he never looked back. You rarely saw him in the media. You didn't see him interviewed often. He didn't become a broadcaster. He didn't become an analyst. He was writing music, playing piano, reading books, going on trips with his wife. That's the guy he was. When he was done with football and he hung up his clipboard, he was out. Maybe that paired with the way he treated media, rubbed media the wrong way, and he's not remembered as fondly. But the guy being an absolute trailblazer, taking a franchise that was garbage, absolute garbage, 0 playoff wins in their first 40 seasons, rattling off 4 Super Bowl championships after the merger when the league doubled in size. That's what he should be remembered for, and that should really be a case in point for Chuck Noll being one of the all-time great head coaches and mentioned every single time you mention all-time great head coaches, not just Super Bowl winners, all-time great head coaches. Now it's time, Steeler Nation, for questions from Steeler Nation. We take the questions from the football forum over at SteelerNation.com. Come on over, it's free to join. I ask a thread each week, seeing what's on the mind of Steeler Nation. And today, this week, we get our first questions from Cooley Man. Cooley asks, do you think the Steelers will make any other free agent moves? I say yeah, Cooley. Free agent wise, I think that they probably will still go out and possibly pick up a veteran running back. I think the running back room is a little thin. They didn't really draft a running back. They got a decent one as an undrafted rookie free agent. But if nothing's hanging on in camp, it looks like they need to upgrade. If there's still injury problems with McFarland, I think they're going to go running back. Also, outside possibility for offensive tackle. Depends on who's cut, though. I don't think they're going to make a move before training camp. If there's an injury or someone big gets cut at roster cutdowns or a surprise cut where they can think it's a good plug and play for them, that's the only spot where I can see the Steelers making a move. Would be an offensive tackle or running back. Next question. Will Mason Rudolph, be part of the team come week 1? I've touched on base on this on the vidcast before, and at this moment, this really has to be Rudolph's moment to shine. The stage is set. He's going to be given a chance to run with the ones. He ran with the ones last year in preseason and during the regular season when Ben was down. He has the most experience on the team running with the ones. But is he going to stand up and shine? Or is he going to be a little curmudgeon about the fact that he wasn't given the job, that he has to compete with Trubisky, that he has to compete with Kenny Pickett? I don't think Olodikin is going to even be in the mix as far as for being a starter, but I think Olodikin has a chance of pushing Rudy off of the roster. The same way that Duck Hodges pushed Josh Dobbs off the roster when we traded him to Jacksonville right before roster cutdowns. Same way Mason Rudolph pushed Landry Jones off the roster when Landry Jones used to be the backup for Ben. Or Jarvis Landry Jones. My gosh, Jarvis Landry. But I digress. If Olodikin does well, he's got a chance of making a situation because it has to pair with Kenny Pickett also. Kenny Pickett shows he can start. You got to make a strong case to possibly be trading Mitchell Trubisky because he's got the biggest contract. It's the most money they can save is by getting rid of him. And they can basically get rid of him for next to nothing. Not a bad way to trim the roster if Olodikin and Kenny Pickett show they are better than Mason Rudolph. So you got trade options. Maybe you can trade third or fourth for Mason Rudolph. Maybe you can trade a 1 or a 2 for a Trubisky. That's why I put those two in that category. And it all comes down to how these rookies are going to be competing in the preseason as well. But we'll have to see. But it is Rudy's last chance, in my opinion, for making this roster. Next question. How many rookies stick on the 53-man roster? Well, let's run down the rookies here quickly. Obviously, the first-round draft pick, Kenny Pickett, he's a lock. He's going to be in the mix either as the 1 or the 2. I don't think he's going to be the 3. I don't think he's going to hold a clipboard this year. I think he's going to be 1 or 2. Next pick, George Pickens, wide receiver, big wide receiver, fast wide receiver. He's a lock. He's going to make the roster. That's 2. DeMarvin Leal playing defensive tackle, albeit at like more of an outside position, like a Tuitt or a Hayward, drafted Loudermilk last year. Wormley's on the roster. He's going to be in the mix there. I think he's a lock as well, especially if Tuitt doesn't make the team. Leo has to be a lock in that situation. 4th round pick, Calvin Austin, looking for that shifty slot guy, but also has speed, can also kick and punt return. This guy's got a lot of different things he can do to make this team. I'd say he's a lock at number 4. Now we're going down to Connor Hayward, number 6 round pick. He's the 5th pick on the Steelers. I say he's pretty much a lock to make this team as well, because we do not have a 3rd tight end on the team. Ebron left the team, so now we only have Gentry and Pat Freiermuth from last year. So this leaves a spot wide open for 3rd tight end. Also can back up fullback. Also, if he shows he's a monster on special teams like he was drafted for, he's a lock. I say those guys, those 5, you should expect to see on this team. Now, the other 2 have a tougher hill to climb. First 7th rounder being Mark Robinson, who I interviewed. Great guy, good linebacker, but we've got a lot of inside linebackers on this team. He has to show he's got to push off somebody like Buddy that we drafted last year, or Marcus Allen, who's a monster on special teams, or UG3, who really doesn't do as much on special teams. If his talent isn't showing this year, UG3 might be done this season. And a guy like Robinson could push him off the roster. Now, Chris Olodikin being the last pick, this is an interesting one. A lot of factors have to come into play for him to make the team. I think he's got the least chance of making this team. I think he's got a good chance of making the practice squad if he clears waivers. But he's got to show he's good enough to be a 3rd quarterback on this team to make it so we have to get rid of Rudolph or Trubisky, because there's no way we're getting rid of Kenny Pickett with a 1st round pick. 0 chance. Or an injury happens. That would be the only other way he'd be a lock on the team. But right now, Olodikin and Robinson have the hardest chance of making this team. 5 are locks. I will say 2 maybes. 1 maybe, 1 outside. Real outside shot for Olodikin making this roster. A lot of factors have to happen. Next question. Does AB deserve the honor of retiring as a Steeler? I know we wrote an article over at SteelerNation.com. Go check this out. Stated that there's no way bridges were burned. I understand that line of thinking. But he also did put up some of the best numbers ever. He definitely put up the best numbers ever in a short area of time for any Steeler wide receiver. I mean, it's tough for the Steelers to want him to come back to retire. If it's strictly to retire, I don't have as much of a problem with it. But you got to get past Rooney, and he burned that bridge pretty hard with Rooney because it's Rooney's decision. And right now, for a guy that left the way he did, that cost the Steelers $23 million in dead money, and they only got a third rounder and a fifth rounder because he scuttled a first round trade option to Buffalo. That would be a very tough pill to swallow for the Rooney family, I think. So if I think it's actually going to happen, I don't think it's going to happen. Would I mind if it happened? I wouldn't mind. Maybe even far enough down the road. If he can turn his life around 10 years, 20 years from now, I could see him being in the Hall of Honor for the Pittsburgh Steelers because he definitely gave us a lot of big plays and was a very memorable player on the field, even more so than he became the memorable person off the field since he's left the team. Last question from Cooley. Which position group still needs shoring up before the season starts? We talked about that. I said offensive tackle and running back. Next question from MTC. Will George Pickens have a big year? The UGA bias in me says yes. How about you? We all know the only university that matters is UGA. How about them dogs? Sick 'em. Well, congratulations, MTC. I'm finally glad that your dogs finally shed the moniker of being the bridesmaids and never the bride. They finally got the monkey off their back and got a championship. Congratulations to your team. But he's got a long way to go before he supplants the best UGA wide receiver on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Should be Hall of Famer, Hines Ward. Hines Ward, man, he's my all-time favorite. But I could see Pickens having a good year. I don't see him being a starter. I don't see him supplanting Claypool. I think he's going to really be pushing Claypool to be better than what he was last year. It's going to be a really good fight because I think that's the position where he has to go unless Pickens plays slot. And if he plays slot, who's going to be the other slot? Is it going to be Austin in the second slot? Are they going to be competing for each other in that slot position? Because right now I think I got Austin chalked in to be in that first slot. But if Pickens shows that he wants to be on the field and he's position flexible, that's his chance to get numbers. And then, the only way he's going to put up big numbers like Chase for the Bengals numbers being a rookie last year, making the Pro Bowl, is if Claypool gets hurt and he's thrust into becoming the Z receiver. That's the only way I can see it. Otherwise, I'm just going to root for him, and I'm hoping he does well. Next question's from Black and Gold Bleeder. I've tuned in a few times to find people on there who I have no idea who they are. Why don't you or can you identify them as they are on the forums? Well, you're asking a vidcast question when I'm live on the vidcast and people chime in, especially from YouTube. YouTube has a lot of people from the football forum, the Steeler Nation football forum. A guy like Carlos Goncalves, I know, is Lidos. I'll say, hey, Lidos, when he pops up. Same thing with Robert C. I'll call him Cooley Man when he's on there, or Cooley when he shows up. Every once in a while, we have somebody posting under their names like you, Bleeder. But I ask at the top of the show, hey, if you're in the forum, make sure to put your handle on there so we know who you are. It makes it fun, and I like it too. So I'll keep doing that, and we'll keep watching that together over at the vidcast, which usually airs on Tuesdays at 7. Blitz asks the next questions. What to expect from Loudermilk in year 2? I love the pick, and I thought he did well in his limited playing time last year. I agree. I liked what he did as well. He got more and more snaps as the season progressed. He was really pushing himself to be the backup swing anytime anybody came off the field with Wormley or um, Hayward. I think he started a game when Wormley was down. Um, but yeah, I think he's progressing nicely, and especially since the Steelers had to not waste, but traded up to pick up Loudermilk and lost a draft pick in this year's draft, which is why they didn't have a fifth rounder. That's because they picked up Loudermilk. So yeah, I'm glad he at least is starting to show he's doing well. He's going to be competing with Leal as well this year. So it's going to be interesting unless Leal's going to show he can bump down inside, which I'm not sold on, but we'll have to see. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing him and looking forward to him to hopefully being on a podcast interview here sometime. Who is the week 1 starting quarterback? I've said this many times on the podcast, many times on the vidcast. Right now, thumbs to the vice. My only choice is Mitchell Trubisky. Just as the veteran presence, highest payroll on the roster. I think he's going to be given the most opportunity, and he has the best chance of running an RPO. He's done it in Chicago. He has more starts in the NFL than anybody else on our roster. I say he has the lead right now going into training camp without seeing any of them compete yet. Does not mean that Rudolph can't take it. Does not mean that Kenny Pickens can't take it. I don't see Alodikin doing it at all, but it's a 3-man race. But right now, I'd say it's Trubisky. Will Marcus Jones have a Pro Bowl season for the Patriots? I would have to say last year, his rookie season is the only year in a very long time that you're ever going to see Mac Jones again in the Pro Bowl. Why? Because now there's a huge influx of quarterbacks in the AFC. You just had Matty Ice join Indy. You just had Russell Wilson join Denver. You had Deshaun Watson join the frickin' Brownies. And then you got to go up against these young, great quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Herbert. Over at the Chargers, you got Lamar Jackson, who's won an MVP. You got Joe Burrow, up-and-comer. You got Carr, who's even a great quarterback over the Raiders. Josh Allen, for gosh sakes, man. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 quarterbacks I see today ahead of Mac Jones. Jones really got to start putting up numbers and not just being a system guy to show he can make a Pro Bowl, and it's going to be a really difficult job to do it against that lineup in the AFC this year. It's going to be a tough one. So no, don't see it again. Zoneberg! Last questions from Zoneberg. When will a new GM be hired, and who will it be? Just going off of just the way everything works out right now, there's no rush yet to bring in a new guy until I'd say training camp. So I think we'll have a new GM by training camp. Will Kevin Colbert still be part of the organization in some way, shape, or form? Hopefully a vice president of football operations or something. I hope so. I think it'd be an easier transition. But they just finished the second round of interviews. We know internally, Brandon Hunt, head of scouting, Omar Khan, the capologist, have interviewed a second time. Doug Whaley, the former GM from the Bills, who also worked with the Steelers a little bit. Andy Weidel from the Eagles. John Spytek from the Bucks, and Ryan Cowden from the Titans. Ryan Cowden from the Titans. Those are the only guys that got second interviews. Riddick's out of the running, unfortunately. The guy I wanted. He got a new big contract over at ESPN, so congratulations, Louis Riddick. Sorry you're not going to be the next GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I am happy for you and happy for your family at your next great contract, and looking forward to listening to you over at ESPN, my friend. Out of all those guys, who am I going to lean toward? I mean, I'd be fine with Hunt. I'd be fine with Weidel from the Eagles. Khan as well, man. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting how it goes down. But if I had a favorite, I'd say Hunt would be my current favorite because he's been interviewing a lot of places. He's got a good shot of being a GM somewhere in this league. Now the Steelers have to decide if they are going to make him their guy. Younger guy, could be on the team for a long time. They like that. They like younger guys. So it'll be interesting to see if he's going to be the next GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, thank you so much, Steeler Nation, for joining us again on the podcast. Check out our sponsor, Total Sports Enterprises, over at tseshop.com. They're giving away free signed jerseys every week, so follow them on Twitter at Total Sports ENT. Vidcast will come out usually Tuesdays at 7, if not Wednesday or Thursday at 7, depending on the week. But usually I try to stick to Tuesday at 7. I'll be there at Tuesday this week. Check out the great Western Pennsylvania sports content over at DKPittsburghSports.com and all of the great podcasts from DK at DKPS Podcasts on Twitter. Read our great Pittsburgh Steeler-focused articles at SteelerNation.com. Follow us on Twitter at Steeler Nation, on Instagram and Facebook at SteelerNation.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter at _SN Podcast or Instagram, Steeler Nation Podcast, or follow me, Steeler Nation Stryker, on Twitter, on Instagram at SN Stryker, spelled with a Y. Thanks for joining us for the Steeler Nation Podcast, sponsored by Total Sports Enterprises, part of the great DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, G. Stryker, rooting along with you as always. Go